Good morning, everyone. So the theme of the history fair that we're having in general is social history and local history. And many of the exhibits are all about individuals' thoughts. We're not just recording what the president did, what the prime minister did, or what the queen did. It's what we do. This is history. Yesterday was history. And in 10 years' time, it'll be as strange to the people around then as it is when we look back today. So Billerica is also interested in social history and has many media sites of all sorts which are talking about social history. So I thought it would be quite interesting and quite fun to have a look at one or two of the things that they've recorded about the history in their town and ours as we go along. So this is a short talk, but with some excerpts of the history between us. Now, of course, the twinning started a very long time ago, if you like, proper history. 1655 is when Billerica was first founded. It was the first, it wasn't when the Mayflower went, that was 1620, but they got around to naming an area of land, Billerica, after our town in 1655. And some of the residents in this town here today are ancestors of those who went over and named that town, because we have the records of that. Now, of course, it wasn't naming a town as we know it. It was a large piece of wilderness, which they were still very busy taming. So they're not looking at things as we are when they named the town. They're talking about an area of land that they hope to bring into production of farming, build a few houses on for the farmers, and then to turn it into a thriving town as best they can in 1655. Well, things have moved on just a little bit since. So the first snippet of history, that's not going to work, that I want to mention is slavery. Now, we ended slavery in the late 1800s, but of course in America that wasn't the case. It was, in the early 1800s here, 1807, I think. It was 1865 in America before slavery was generally outlawed, although there were pockets that continued. Now in Billerica, we had the Paris family, sometimes with two R's, sometimes with one. Such is history. Not entirely sure which is right. And a current Billerica resident, B.J. Snowden, as she likes to be known, is still living in Billerica, and her great-grandparents bought a home in Billerica in 1902. Oops. And that's the first time we have the recording of free black people who could actually own a home in Billerica. Because, of course, as a slave, you couldn't own a home. Now, they came to the town from Canada. That was where they sort of hailed from originally, and came along from Canada into Massachusetts and bought a home in Billerica, and they were the first black family there. And you can see there, we have B.J. Snowden's grandfather, who was the one to come. His father was the one who took the house first. And we have B.J. Snowden's mother and a cousin in that photograph. And you can see the place is not what we would call well-kept lawns or anything like that. We're still really houses with wilderness around them, as it was then. Not a full town as we know it with paved roads or anything like that. And the clothing tells you, these were working people. They worked hard to earn their living and to till the land. It's mostly land. Now, B.J. Snowden's grandmother, and you see a photo of her here, one of those that's a sepia, where they then coloured them. So they chose to colour the flowers, which is rather nice, isn't it, to have the roses. Now, this was her graduation, and she was the first black lady to graduate from high school, the Howe High School, in 1916. So they came in 1902, and she went through high school, which is the equivalent of our senior school, sort of that kind of age range, teenagers through to 18, in 1916. And the building for the school then was opposite the town hall. They built a town hall, we've got one of those. And there she is, proudly in her graduation finery, with a bouquet and photographed, an early photograph too. But very nice she looks. And of course of the period, with the hairband and the dress. That's very much of the period, isn't it? Fashion was very good then. Now, B.J. Snowdon's mother went on to continue the lead in the town and was the first black woman to play basketball, great American game, to play basketball when in an all-white team. They hadn't had a black person in the team before. And that team apparently did really well. They won lots of awards and competitions. But a little sore point, she was never entered into the Billerica Sporting Hall of Fame. They're dealing with that now. Actually, they can fill in forms and you can be retrospectively put onto the Hall of Fame. But she was never put onto the Hall of Fame back then. Some sort of residual reasoning, one has to suppose. But they were also, not just on the team, but cheerleaders. And the grandmother, who saw their graduating, made all the uniforms for the cheerleaders and the team. Because it was all self-help, really, in those days. And of course, as the ladies are going through, the name changes from Paris as they marry. So she became Virginia Finnegan Snowdon. And she graduated in 1941. So we then have a community, the black community is accepted. And indeed, they say that they didn't have too much trouble in Billerica. It was quite accepted. Now, another social history item from Billerica is a large river runs through Billerica called the Concord River. It's not like the Wid that we've got in Billericay, a little stream. It's rather broader than that and rather faster and bigger than that. Big enough to power industrial mills, which they did at one point. But back in the day, in the early 1600s, 1638 there, in the area of land that became Billerica in 1655, we had two gentlemen living there, and they were part of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, because that's what it was called then, the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and they were the governor and deputy governor of this colony, so important people. And land was being divided up. If you did good service, you got land. This is how it happened. You were awarded land. And never mind the natives who might be living upon it, of course. You were awarded the land, and these two gentlemen had a parcel of land each, and I don't mean a little bit of land to build a house on, I mean a lot of land. And they marked this beside the Concord River, which was really the barrier, if you like, the border between the two segments of land. They put down two large rocks and they engraved their names on them. And there is a contention, some of the histories have got this back to front, they tell us. And that's why I'm looking carefully at the slide, because I want to get it right. Who got the north and who got the south? And it was as broad as that. You know, we need to get it right because some of the books have it wrong. So it was empty land. They hoped it would be farms. They were just given the land because they were good citizens and they had performed services. And these rocks are still there today with the names still inscribed upon them. And they're known as the Brothers, although the gentlemen were not brothers. But the rocks, I suppose, being next to each other led you to that idea that they were brothers. So they're known as the Brothers Rocks. They were brothers in arms. That's what they say. Now, Deputy Governor Thomas Dudley got the land north, which became part of Billerica in 1655, and Governor John Winthrop got the land to the south, which was Billerica too in 1655, but later became parceled off as Bedford, because we are in New England, and almost all the towns you would recognise, because they have our English names for the settlers that went there. So they parcelled it off again a bit, and it became Bedford. The rocks, as I say, are right beside the Concord River, which they use for leisure and once upon a time for powering the factories. We had the Faulkner Mills back then, but we don't today. Now we're zooming forward here to 2013. So more recent social history, but still actually a while ago now. Now Billerica has the Board of Selectmen. It's like saying the bosses of the council, really. The selectmen were once those who defended the town. So they actually were men of arms. That's why they were selected to be the men of arms and to defend them, of course, from the natives, who mightn't have liked the fact that their land was being taken away. But anyway, they did make friends with quite a few of them in the end, but there were raiding natives and also raiding other inhabitants, you know, had come over, who perhaps wanted some land or something. There have always been scoundrels, haven't there? So the Billerica select men at the time were men of arms, and it gradually moved on, put away the guns, and become sort of council leaders more than anything else. And they decided in 2013 that our equivalent from the Billericay Mayflower Twinning Association, the Billerica Twinning Group, petitioned, and a road has been named after our town. So we now have Billerica Way, as you can see, and that was the twinning group at the time who petitioned for it, and they had a naming ceremony. It's only a small road, goes past the library to the Masons' Hall. But nevertheless, we have our name in Billerica now as Billerica Way. We have not yet returned the compliment. But that's rather nice, I think, for them to do that. Now, 2012, you might have all noticed, living where we do, that the Olympics was on up in Stratford. I certainly did. I was commuting at the time, and the train stopped at Stratford, and mayhem we had for years. But the Olympics was on in 2012. Now, Bill came over. He was part of the medical staff for the American team. He was part of the track and field team. And he was staying up at Stratford, you know, in the proper official digs that they had for them. And he decided on his day off, he'd come and find Billerica, because he's a Billerica person. So he'd come and find the town. And he got on the train and came here. And what did he do when he got here? He hit the pubs on both sides of the roads. And he thought that was the greatest Olympics ever. So this is history in the making, isn't it? I wonder how many people still in the town might remember him from hitting the pubs. They might, an American accent turning up, you never know. But he had great fun, but that is his enduring memory of the town, that we had pubs on both sides of our high street, and he went in every one of them. So I'm not sure, but it's still history. Now, another visit took place in 2003, and this is between Paula Perry and her husband. They were both teachers, one of them a history teacher in one of the high schools in Billerica, and they came over to find out what Billerica was all about and have a good look at it. And there's a bigger report of their visit on our boards there. But I rather like this paragraph that she wrote for me. She loved how quaint this town was. So in 2003, people from Billerica thought Billerica was quaint. And she especially liked it. She liked the people. She liked the welcome that they had here, which is good. And then, but she thought it was like walking back in time to a simpler life. Now, I'm not sure what that says about Billerica or Billerica, really, but that again is a different viewpoint, isn't it? A simpler time, a simpler life, and quaint. But there you are. That was 2003, so not that long ago, really. Mm. But have we changed so much that we're no longer quaint?
Not really, no.
No. I wonder. Now, this family came over in 2018, and Debbie has written a report, and you can see where they ended up. It was a Sunday. They had a sort of tour of England going on, and they visited many times, this family. They've been here, they came over for the Queen's birthday, you know, Eugenie's wedding, all sorts of things they've been over. And they've been to Billerica, and it sadly was a Sunday, so most of the businesses they reported were shut. Well, that happens, I'm afraid, in the high street. And it was rainy and dreary, she says, looking out the window at what we're experiencing now. So they wandered about, and they came upon the Billerica Brewing Company and visited there, and they met the locals, and the locals met them. And they really enjoyed the locals. So I'm not sure what that means, what they were talking about. There's some nice pictures of them in the Billericay Brewing Co. But they were surprised that the locals they met there hadn't heard of the twinning. Most of them hadn't heard of Billerica. So there's work to do there. We need to spread the word a bit more, so they have all heard of us. But there's some nice photos. They had a lovely time. They were very welcomed and enjoyed it immensely on their visit, even though it was dreary and most places were shut. There's a bit of a theme developing here, isn't there? And it's a theme we've had for years, isn't it? With all the coaching ins we had back in the coaching day. I guess we were known for that then as well. Now, there are lots more stories about Billerica to enjoy, lots more visits, lots more people telling their social history, just as our archive talks about our social history. And it is quite fascinating because in some ways it's parallel to ours and in other ways it's not. We have much the same population and it is considered to be a sort of blue collar, white collar kind of town, much the same as we are. They're not farmers anymore. They have businesses there of various types on the outskirts. But one of the biggest differences is not just the river that runs through the middle, but the fact that though it's the same population, the land mass occupied by Billerica is huge. And what many of them report is we all live so close together. You know, they're used to being much more spread out. There is a forest in Billerica. It's not huge, but there is still a public forest. And there's a lake. Lake Meadows is an equivalent, but they have a beach. It's not at the seaside, but they've got an actual beach at Nuttings Lake. And they have holiday cottages near Nuttings Lake. People used to come as a destination. So there are similarities and there are differences. And I think that's wonderful. We should record that. And we'd love to hear more of your stories and more of theirs as we all progress the twinning, which has been going since 1655, right up till today. So thank you very much. That was my presentation.